So, first question. How long do you think it would take to perform this play? Okay, so you said hour. What did you say, Ty? 2 or 3 hours? Yeah, it actually takes a little over an hour, typically. But there's not very much material here, right? It's only about 6 pages long. So how is it that a 6-page play takes over an hour to perform?
They perform very, very slowly and sweepingly with the questions.
Yeah. No is not very much about language. It's much more about physical motion and about really very slow and controlled and highly stylized physical motion. Typically, a full third of a no play is taken up by the main character's final dance at the end of the play. Right? The final dance usually lasts about 20 minutes. Now, in Japan, a total no performance usually takes about 5 or 6 hours. Because you will sit through a program of 5 of these plays. All of which come from a slightly different variant no genre. We'll talk about those in a minute. What else did you notice about this? How'd this go for you? Was there anything that really struck you as weird or confusing?
When reading it was, what was the significance of them repeating certain lines?
This is something, honestly, I can only kind of speculate about. But I think it has to do with the roots of no in religious ritual. This is one of, we're actually probably going to notice there are a lot of superficial similarities between no and Greek tragedy. We shouldn't get confused by that, right? They come from completely different sets of cultural circumstances. Any resemblance between them is purely coincidence. But one of these resemblances, yeah, they're both rooted in religious ritual, right? The Greek plays, of course, rooted in Greek paganism. Japanese plays are rooted in Buddhist ritual. And if we think back to the Bhagavad Gita, right, when we talked about Hinduism, what was the ultimate goal for someone like Arjuna? What was Arjuna ultimately trying to do?
Be a warrior, follow his dharma.
Yeah, by following his dharma, right, when he dies, he then moves up to the next stage on the ladder, right, and eventually escapes the cycle of reincarnation by becoming a god, right? So Hinduism is the parent religion for Buddhism, right? Buddhism was initially an offshoot of Hinduism. And Buddhism promises you release from the cycle of reincarnation in this life right now. Like you can actually get out from this one, right? You don't have to wait for the next one and the next one and the next one. You don't have to move all the way up the ladder. You do so by detaching yourself largely from worldly things and from worldly habits. And I think that the repetitions here often represents the character's attachments to things of the world that cause them to repeat previous actions in their lives, right? I think that's what's going on with the repetitions. That's the best answer I can give you. But again, this might be something that you might want to look up on your own if it's something that interests you. Yes, Sarah?
In the beginning of it, it was talking a lot about the knowers,
Okay.
People that play the flutes, or...
Well, yeah, one of them is playing a flute, and it actually would have been weird for a reaper, right? We're talking about people who are going out into the fields and harvesting. That image is itself important, so let's sit on that for a minute. If we look on page 1498, Rensho the monk says, "Was it one of you I just heard playing the flute? Yes, it was one of us. How touching. For people such as you, that is a remarkably elegant thing to do. Oh, yes, it is very touching. Why is Rensho surprised to see...
Isn't that something done generally by aristocratic people? Someone hired.
Exactly, yeah. This is something like, in the West, flutes are often sort of like flutes and pipes and that sort of thing are often sort of peasant instruments and associated with shepherds and doing jaunty little jigs in the field while you watch your sheep and that sort of thing. Not so in Japan. The flute is the instrument that is most associated with the samurai class, with the aristocracy. So to have a simple peasant mower out playing the flute, that's weird. And Rensho is noting that is a strange thing. What a remarkably elegant thing for people like you to do. I mean, it sounds arrogant, and it is a little bit, and the youth kind of upbraids him for it, but it does also suggest that this youth among the reapers is maybe not quite what he at first appears to be. Who is the youth who leads the reapers? Yes, this youth is in fact the ghost of Atsumori.
I don't know, I kept reading Reaper as like a Grim Reaper, so is it like a person that tills the soil or something?
Yeah, well, what does a reaper do? If you're reaping, you're not tilling the soil, right?
You're
Tilling the
harvesting.
soil, you're planting, right?
So you're cutting
Yeah,
it.
exactly. A reaper harvests.
A scythe was used for harvesting wheat. The Grim Reaper had a scythe that harvested souls.
Yeah, so that's the source of the image. Yeah, that's sort of gathering in, right? Now, these reapers are not gathering in souls so much as they're gathering up the karma, right? The consequences of the actions of their past lives. So yeah, what Atsumori here is presented here as a reaper because as a ghost haunting this shore, he is reaping the consequences of his actions in life. So that's what's up with the reapers and the flute. Other questions you guys have about this? Anything else that particularly can... What does this play seem to be missing that we usually expect from drama or from literature? Okay, yeah, well, there are no women, right? And indeed, like in a no company, all of the actors would be male. Even by and large to this day, all no actors would be male. But they do actually have men play women's parts. Sometimes there are just no women in this play. There are women in other plays. For example, the play that I was playing the music from at the beginning of class, Yuya, is a play that centers on a female character, played by a man wearing a mask.
Don't all the players wear masks?
Not in No. The way a No company is divided up, right, there are two sort of main actors, right? The shite, yes, I know what that looks like, and the waki. The shite is, for lack of a better term, the protagonist. The waki is not an antagonist usually. The waki is more sort of a supporting character.
When I was reading the beginning of the thing, I read the introduction. They don't really have antagonists, do they?
No. That's actually one of the things I was getting at was the question of what's missing from this play, right? One thing that's missing from this play is conflict, right? Pardon?
Is that the same plot, like, or is that?
Well, there is a plot in that, like, there are events that occur in a particular order, right? There is something that happens.
But the actual conflicts happen before the actual play.
Yeah, the play isn't about conflict. What the play is about, and what no plays are often about, is in fact reconciliation and or initiation. These are the primary themes of a no play. They're about getting the shite, the protagonist, the lead character, to let go of the baggage of that previous life in certain no forms. In other genres, the purpose is for the shite to instruct the waki in some branch of theology or philosophy, right? More on that in a minute, right? But yeah, who would be the shite and who would be the waki in this play? Who do you think is supposed to be the protagonist and who's supposed to be the supporting character?
Well, if you're trying to get them to let go of something, it would probably be Atsumori, who would be the shite, and the waki would be Rensho.
Yeah. There are actually a couple of ways you can tell when you're reading a no play which character is supposed to be the waki and which is supposed to be the shite. One is that the waki always appears first. The waki is the first person on stage. And he will always do a couple of things. First, he will recite a short chant that relates to some Buddhist religious concept. If we look, for example, on page 1496, right? The world is all a dream, and he who wakes, the world is all a dream, and he who wakes, casting it from him, may yet know the real. Right? The idea of the material world, this world, as being sort of an illusion that covers up the real world, and that you only get to transcendence, you achieve Buddhahood, right? By rejecting this world, by seeing through the illusion. You have before you one who in his time was Kumagai no Jiro Neozane, a warrior from Musashi province. Now I have renounced the world, and Rensho is my name. It was I, you understand, who struck Atsumori down, and the great sorrow of this deed moved me to become the monk you see. Now I am setting out for Ichi-no-Tani to comfort Atsumori and guide his spirit toward enlightenment. The wandering moon, issuing from the ninefold clouds, issuing from among the ninefold clouds, swings southwards by Yodo and Yamazaki, past Koya Pond and the Yakuta River, and Suma Shore, loud with pounding waves, to Ichi-no-Tani where I have arrived, to Ichi-no-Tani where I have arrived. Having come so swiftly, I have reached Ichi-no-Tani in the province of Tsu. Now, there is nothing on the stage as he's walking to indicate where he is. All no stages are exactly the same. Right? It's a raised platform, square, a little bridgeway the characters can come across on. You have musicians who will sit and play on the side, usually flutes, drums, some kind of stringed instrument. And a painting on the back wall of a single pine tree. Every no stage looks like that. So there are virtually no props, no set pieces. So this is how you get a sense of place in a no play. The waki starts the play after his little Buddhist couplet with a kind of walking song. He tells you where he's starting out from, then he mimes walking around the stage, and tells you all the places he's passing through, and then tells you where he's wound up. So you can tell which character is the waki because he's the first one on stage, he announces the little couplet, and he does that little walking thing. Now, there's another way to identify the shite in any given play, and that's largely just by knowing what kind of play it is. Right, I alluded to the fact, I mentioned that a typical no program consists of 5 plays, right? And each of the 5 plays is drawn from a different subgenre. The subgenres are named for the kind of character the shite plays in that particular play. So the first play in a No program will typically be what's called Kami No. And in a Kami No play, the shite will play a god. And these plays are usually celebratory, joyful in tone. Often the god is initially disguised, and the waki is a priest or a monk who comes upon this disguised god. And the whole point of the play is for the waki to eventually realize who he's talking to, and the shite to then reveal himself as a god and initiate the waki into secret knowledge, right? The second type, this is the type that Atsumori belongs to, is called a shuramono. And shuramono plays are warrior plays. So typically the shite in a shuramono will portray a dead samurai who is dwelling on sort of the moment of his loss and defeat. And the point in these plays is for the waki to come and help the shite let go and move on to the next life. The third type, Kazuramono, are woman plays. That is, the shite plays the role of a woman. And these plays are usually about unhappy love. The fourth category, Kuruimono, is a sort of miscellaneous category. Sometimes the shite plays a ghost. Sometimes the shite plays an insane person. The thing that really binds this particular category together is you have a shite who is not fully in control of his or her own actions. And finally, the program will end with what's called a kirimono. Nope, not mono. Kirimono. And a kirimono play, the shite plays a demon. Now, demons, again, we have to remember outside of Western traditions, are sometimes simply powerful nature spirits, right? They're not necessarily evil. And so usually the kirimono play sort of expresses sort of energy and triumph. So the idea is to try to you begin and end the program on these kind of up notes with a great sort of dip in the middle, right? Most of the tragedy, as we would think of it, the negative emotions are mostly for the plays in the center of the program. Now, between each of these plays, you have short comic interludes performed by a clown called kyogen. And these are basically just to sort of lighten the mood in between these very heavy, very slow no plays. The kyogen also does have, the kyogen is also the name of the company's clown. And the kyogen does have a role to play in the no plays as well, not just in the interludes, right? The villager, for example, who provides the history of Atsumori to Rensho, which of course Rensho already knows, would be the company's kyogen, right? The company's clown.
So are they wearing masks or face paint while they're doing this, or is it just them?
Usually just the shite. In most cases, only the shite wears a mask. And that's, one way you can certainly identify who the central character is supposed to be when you're watching, is the person wearing the mask. Usually the waki in any of these is going to play a priest or a monk. Right? Remember, this is drama that originates in religious ritual and that retains a lot of the features of religious ritual, even to this day. All right, so anybody have any other questions so far about anything I've just told you or about the play? Everybody's still with me? Okay, then let's talk a little bit about what's going on in the play itself, more specifically. Right, so who are these two characters? Who are Rensho and Atsumori? Who are these guys?
Samurai.
Pardon?
I said they're samurai.
Yeah, they're samurai. Or at least they were, right? Neither of them is a samurai any longer. Right? Why is Rensho no longer a samurai?
Because he killed Atsumori and felt guilty because he was similar to his son, I believe.
Mm-hmm. And so he has renounced his lands and his title and become a monk. Right. So he gives up his name, right? He was Kumagai. He is Kumagai no longer. Now he is Rensho. And he's become an itinerant monk. Now, why is Atsumori no longer a samurai?
He's dead.
Yeah,
He was defeated.
exactly. It is hard to continue in your profession after you have passed on. Right. Some logistical difficulties there. So, Rensho, yes, has killed Atsumori. Let's look at the description of the fight between them. If we look on page 1500, can I get somebody to start reading from Now One Among Them? Who feels like being a clownish villager? All right, yeah, go for it, John. Now One Among Them, top of the page. Yep.
No one among them, a young gentleman of the 5th rank named Atsumori, was the son of Tsunemori, the director of palace repairs. Atsumori was on his way down to the sea, meaning to board the imperial barge, when he realized that back in the camp he had forgotten his flute, Little Branch. He prized his flute very highly and hated to leave it behind for the enemy's taking. So he turned back, fetched the flute, and again went down to the beach. But by this time the imperial barge and the rest of the fleet had sailed. Just as he was riding into the sea, hoping to swim his horse out to the ships, Kumagai no Jiro Neozane, a warrior from Musashi province, spread his war gun and challenged him to fight.
Okay, we can stop there for now. Right, so what ultimately is the cause of Atsumori's death? Forgetting the flute, exactly. Going back for the flute. He would not have been killed, or at least would not have been killed in this way at this time, if he had been willing to leave the flute behind. So, from a Buddhist perspective, what's Atsumori doing wrong? Yeah, he's too attached to a worldly possession. He's too attached to his worldly status. Right? Remember that the flute is also a symbol of samurai status. It's a symbol of wealth and power. It's the characteristic instrument of the samurai class. All right, good. So, can I get somebody else to read from Atsumori Wheeled His Horse? All right, Ty, go for it.
Atsumori wheeled his horse and goes fiercely with Kumaji.
Mhm.
The two crashed to the ground between their mounts.
Kumagai.
Kumagai was a very powerful man. He instantly got Atsumori under him and ripped off his helmet, meaning to take his head. He saw a youth of 15 or 16 with powdered face and blackened teeth. A young man of high rank, there was no doubt about that. Kumagai wanted to spare him. Then he glanced behind him and saw Doi and
Kashibara.
riding up. Against 7 or 8 other warriors were with them. I do not wish to kill you, said Kumagai, but as you can see, there are many men from my own side behind. I will take your head myself, then and afterwards pray with all my heart for the peace of your spirit. So he cut off Atsumori's head. On examining the body, he found a flute and a brocade bag attached to the waist. When he showed the flute to his commander, all present witnessed. Is it present or present?
Present.
Okay.
Yep.
All present with the sleeves of their owner with tears. To think that he had been carrying a flute at a time like that, even among all those gentlemen from the court, he must have been an especially gentle youth. Eventually, Kumagai found out that his victim had been Atsumori.
All right, thank you very much. So how does this scene here play out, this conflict between these two warriors? Why does Kumagai kill Atsumori?
Because his men were behind. He was afraid of what they'll say or do.
Yeah. Two of his companions are riding up right behind them, right behind him. If he doesn't kill Atsumori, they will. And what can he offer that he doesn't know they will?
Swift death.
Yeah, he will. Well, swift death would have been normal in this kind of combat anyway. But yeah, what he can offer is like, look, I know after I've killed you, will then pray for the rest of your soul, for the repose of your soul, right? So he is willing to sacrifice his own status to help someone else make their way properly to the afterlife. Now we see other evidence here of Atsumori's worldly attachments, right? What does he look like when Rensho takes his helmet off?
He's dressed in,
Prophecy.
Yeah, he's dressed like a courtier, even like, in the heat of battle, right? His face is powdered and his teeth are blackened. The black teeth thing would have been another mark of rank. In feudal Japan, the sight of teeth was considered disgusting. So if you didn't pull your teeth out, which some people did, you blackened them with a paste so that it looked, when you open your mouth, it looked like you didn't have any teeth. Fashion's weird, right?
For people to wear gold teeth.
Well, I'm sure there are plenty of contemporary. Well, I mean, hell, if we, walking around whitening our teeth, right? That would probably look disgusting to someone from 14th century Japan. It's like, well, why do you want to enhance that? No, black them out, black them all out. But the point here, right, is that Atsumori is still behaving like a rich courtier, even in the heat of battle, right? He's very much attached to worldly things and to worldly power. The marks of his rank are very important to him. Marks of his status as a courtier are very important to him. Now, the context for this, Atsumori and Kumagai are both combatants in a conflict known as the Genpei War. This would be late 12th century. And essentially, this was a war between two very powerful samurai clans. The Taira, or the Heike. Both of these terms are used more or less interchangeably. And the Minamoto, or Genji. Atsumori is a Taira. Kumagai / Rensho, well, when he was Kumagai, he was a Minamoto. Now that he's a monk, he has no family ties. Right? A Buddhist monk renounces all ties to the world. The Taira essentially controlled the emperor. Theoretically, Japan was ruled by an emperor who was descended from the sun goddess Amaterasu, and it was his godly presence that guided the destiny of Japan. Right? In practice, the country was usually ruled by these powerful samurai clans who jockeyed for influence by marrying their daughters to the emperor. So, whichever clan's daughter happened to be the favored wife of the emperor, usually that clan actually took charge of the affairs of the nation. Yeah, Frank.
So this was before the time of the shogun, or that clan would be the shogun.
I'm getting to that.
Right.
Yeah, we're actually talking before the time of the shogun.
All right.
Yes. Even before the time of the shogun, the emperor didn't really rule the country. Now, at the time of the Genpei War, the emperor of Japan was an 8-year-old boy. And the Minamoto were essentially challenging the Taira for control of the nation because they sensed that, okay, there's a child on the throne, the emperor is weak, right? We can push this decadent clan that's been running things for a while out to sea and run things ourselves. So the Minamoto actually do win the war, in part by making sure that every Taira heir is killed. The emperor himself and his grandmother commit suicide to avoid falling into the hands of the Minamoto. And the last of the Taira warriors are drowned off the coast of a region of Japan called Suma. More on Suma in a minute. In fact, there's a local legend about this. Have any of you ever heard of a Heike crab? I will take it from your silence that you have not. Okay. There are these crabs that come up on the coast of Japan, and if you look at the back of their shells, it looks like the face of an angry warrior. And so the legend is that these are the spirits of the Taira samurai who drowned off the coast. So yeah, they're called Heike crabs for this reason.
How do you spell that?
Heike. All of this, by the way, comes from a chronicle called the Tale of the Heike. So the Minamoto win the war, and they institute the first shogunate. The shoguns are essentially military dictators. So for the next 700 years or so after this battle, Japan is ruled by a military dictatorship. There's still an emperor, but the emperor is even more a puppet than before. Right? The emperor's function is sort of purely spiritual and symbolic.
So is this the story, or is like in real life too?
This is history.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this is actual history.
Is there still a shogun now?
Oh no. I mean, there is
Shogun. Yeah, they got rid of the shogun after
in the 19th century. Yeah.
after the Americans opened the border, and that was a whole other bag of worms. That war.
Yeah.
Basically, the Europeans overthrew the country and established a government.
But anyway, the reason why this is important, right, is that no drama was the official art form of the shogunate. The shoguns, from the late 14th century onward, were its primary patrons and supporters. Right? This was the official art of the Japanese government. It was pitched primarily to the aristocracy. Right? In order to understand No, you had to be particularly refined and cultured. Right? There were other forms of theater for the commoners. Right? Like, I don't know if you're familiar at all with kabuki theater. Kabuki is the one where everyone runs around with painted faces and elaborate wigs. And kabuki is fast-moving and violent and often funny, and there's a lot of action. Right? Kabuki was pitched at common audiences. No was not. No was pitched primarily at courtiers. And the idea was that to understand this very slow, stylized, complex spiritual arts, you had to be someone who was very refined. Now, the history of the shogunate is itself then written into this play. Zeami Motokiyo the author was one of the first playwrights that the shoguns began patronizing at the beginning of the 15th century. In fact, Zeami wrote, there are 250 surviving No plays. Zeami wrote 90 of them. So, astonishingly prolific writer. Long career as a writer, actor, and troupe manager. And yeah, he was actually educated in part at the expense of one of the shoguns. Now, the shogun, who was Zeami's patron, was descended from this Minamoto clan that had established the shogunate at the end of the Genpei War. So do we see a political motive developing in the way this play is shaped? He's writing to please a patron, right? And so he has to make the patron's family, the patron's ancestors, look good. And one of the ways to make them look good is to reconcile them with the previous regime and make it look as though the new regime has the endorsement of the old, right? If we look, for example, in Act 2, page 1502, starting with Atsumori, Rows of Taira Mansions. So I'll read the Atsumori parts. The chorus parts we'll all read together, okay? All right. Let's give this a shot, see how this goes. All right. Rows of Taira mansions lined the streets. We were the leafy branches on the trees. Like the rose of Sharon, we flowered one day. As the teaching that enjoins the good is seldom found, birth in the human realm quickly ends, like a spark from a flint. This we never knew, nor understood, that vigor is followed by decline. Lords of the land we were, but caused much grief. Blinded by wealth, we never knew our pride. Yes, the house of Taira ruled the world 20 years and more, a generation that passed by as swiftly as a dream. Then came the Jue years, and one sad fall, when storms stripped the trees of all their leaves, and scattered to the four directions, we took to our fragile leaf-like ships, just asleep upon the waves. Our very dreams foretold no return. We were like caged birds that missed the clouds, or homing geese that have lost their way. We never lingered long under one sky, but traveled on for days and months and years, till the last spring came round again, and we camped here at Ichinotani. So we stayed on, hard by Suma shore, while winds swept down upon us off the hills. All right, so how is Atsumori describing the rule of his own clan?
something that happens so fast and then scattered so
Mhm.
easily, so fragile.
Yeah, on the one hand, yeah, very fragile, like completely ephemeral, right?
Cruel.
Okay, cruel. What's your evidence for cruelty?
He stated it. Lords of land we were, but caused much grief. Blinded
Uh-huh.
by wealth, we never knew our pride.
Okay, so yeah, at the very least, we're looking at an image of pride and decadence, right? Even if not outright malice and cruelty. So yeah, we had, essentially a very rich clan that's out of touch, right? Blinded by their own power, blinded by their own greed. And here Atsumori is confessing to this, right? Yeah, okay, we were the Taira, we ruled, and we sucked, right? We were terrible. And thank you, Mr. Minamoto Monk, for coming and helping me release my spirit so that I can go proceed to the afterlife where, frankly, the Taira belong. Yeah, Ashley.
So is that like kind of like a sign of repentance, like in a way? Like after, I mean, the fact that he acknowledged it and stuff?
Yeah, and I think, yeah, that's part of it is to get the ghost to acknowledge the sort of karmic debts that he has, right? It's like, okay, yeah, we deserved everything that was coming to us. And so part of that admission is part of getting him out of the cycle of worldly suffering and into Buddhist nirvana. But part of it also, again, is political. It's praising the shogun's family and the shogun's ancestors at the expense of the shogun's traditional enemies. So even sort of, what looks to us like primarily spiritual reconciliation is in fact something a little bit more. Now, in order to release himself from worldly bonds, right, Atsumori spends about 20 minutes dancing his way out of this worldly existence. So, just to give you some sense of what no looks like, I've got a brief clip here. I'm going to show you, not the whole thing, because sitting here for 20 minutes, watching very, very glacially slow movements would probably not be in the best use of our time. But I do, pardon?
So I probably fall asleep.
Well, try not to.
I'm talking about if we spend 20 minutes on it.
Well, try not to anyway. Okay. Are we waking up? We are. Good. Now, I told you this was going to be a dance, right? So why isn't he moving? Now notice how as he continues, right, the movements get faster and he ranges more widely across the stage. Right now, why do you think this is? What is this meant to represent? Pardon?
Like him entering like a spirit kind of, I guess.
And being freed from that one place that he's been stuck at.
Yeah, and what is it that stuck him at that particular place? What is he carrying?
Karma.
Yeah, exactly. At the beginning of the dance, he's weighted down by that karmic debt.
And as he begins to move more, the karma is beginning to fall away from him.
Exactly. That's what's going on here. All right, so I think we all more or less get the idea, right? Okay. So, probably, in a lot of ways, the thing that this is most comparable to that we've done so far, I apologize for your eyes. Do you remember when we looked at Confucius? And I showed you that video at the beginning of class of that Confucian ritual in Korea. What do you remember about that?
It was very slow, very organized. Everyone moved in sync and they all had their own roles.
Yep. And how were those roles determined, and why does everyone move in sync?
By their social class.
Because everyone makes this society.
Pardon?
Everyone is a part of a bigger thing.
Yeah, everybody has to learn their particular role, right, and practice that particular role, because if one person doesn't do their part, the ritual fails, and ritual is a sort of metaphor for the universe, right? Now, people who are practicing Confucian rituals will then, sort of practice parts that have been passed down for generations. And no actors do pretty much the same thing. Traditionally, only 5 families are permitted to perform no plays. And they've been doing it since the 15th century. And so the arts, the techniques, have been passed down from father to son for over 500 years. The way this actor is performing Atsumori is more or less the way his father and grandfather and great-grandfather would have performed the character, right? The character has been doing the same movements since the 15th century, right? So they spend years learning these particular motions, these particular actions, and each motion that a no actor makes is typically symbolic, right? This is not a realistic style of acting, right? If you have a character who is, shedding tears on stage, right, you're not going to get someone actually trying to whip up crocodile tears, right, crying and sobbing, right? You'll have the character say, "Lo, I am distressed," or some such thing, and then raising a closed fan to his eyes. That symbolizes weeping. A character who is firing an arrow will take the fan and make a sweep in the shape of a bow. Right? So specific actions in the real world are connected to specific gestures that a no actor makes. And yeah, they spend their childhoods learning how to do this. So, Zeami himself would have learned these techniques from his own father. All right. Anything else you observed about the dance here? Anything else that you noticed about it or struck you as strange about it?
Musicians in the back.
Okay, yeah. What about them?
Were they supposed to be the chorus or just the...
No, the chorus in a no play is actually a separate group of performers. So let's break down for a second exactly who is involved in a no play, right? So we know about the shite and the waki, right? The shite is the lead actor, the waki is the supporting actor, but there are a bunch of other people on or around the stage. First off, the shite and the waki themselves often have attendants. Right, so the shite will often have a henchman called the shite sore. He will also be followed by a group of stagehands called koken. Usually 3 of them. And the chorus, or the jutai, which is a chorus of 8 to 10 minutes. Now, one thing to note about the chorus as well, it's J-I-U, not J-I-N, jutai. The chorus in Greek plays functioned as a character, right? It's this sort of mass character that represents the perspective of ordinary people, basically the audience's perspective in the play. The Japanese chorus, the no chorus, does not work the same way. What does the chorus here seem to do? Does it seem to, if it doesn't function as an independent character, what does it seem to be doing?
Seems to be, as in the case right then, picking up where the one actor left off.
Yeah, sometimes it enhances things that the shite will say, right? It speaks with him.
Adding weight to their words.
Pardon?
I was just saying by adding weight to their words.
Yeah. And typically, yeah, the only thing that they will do is either, back up the shite, or, sometimes the chorus will be responsible for a certain amount of narration. Right, because, again, like in plays where there are few props and few set pieces, you need to do a fair amount of narration. You need to do a lot of explaining. This is where I am, this is what I am holding, right? So on and so forth. On the other side of the stage, right, we have the waki and his henchman, the wakitsore. This play does not include a shitesori or a wakitsore. And surrounding the stage are the hayashi, or musicians. And the music is an essential part of the no play as well. And this also is passed down by tradition. Now, what's most important in a performance of Atsumori, right, is the sort of otherworldly flute sound. And while the drums don't appear, well, let me ask you this. Did the drumming sound to you like it was keeping a regular beat?
It was off.
It sounded to you like it was off? And yeah, according to Western musical measures, yes, it would be. But, are any of you familiar with haiku? What's a haiku? Anybody? Can somebody tell me what a haiku is? Yes, secret. You seem excited about this.
It's a Japanese poem,
Uh-huh.
and it doesn't really, it gives details and specifies a certain object or item, but it doesn't tell you what it is. Kind of like it does, like in charades.
5, 7, 5, 7.
Yeah, 5 is the same.
Yeah.
It's like 5, 7.
That's what I was looking for, yes, is the rhythm, the meter of a haiku, yes. 5 syllables, 7 syllables, 5 syllables. That's actually what the drummers are doing. They're following the rhythms of haiku. So it doesn't end up sounding like a steady musical. It's not like that sort of the steady, what Captain Beefheart once called the bump bump mother heartbeat of Western music. They're following traditions of Japanese poetry. So yeah, that's what's going on with the drumming there. All right, so What else can we do? What else do you want to know about No? What's that?
What was with the hair?
Yeah, the costume is pretty elaborate, right? And looks pretty heavy and pretty uncomfortable. Yeah, and the hair is just, I mean, it's just part of the top knot on top of his head, right? I mean, it is a wig, right? It's not real hair. The top knot is actually the symbol of the samurai class. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, just these stylized costumes, like, look, like the whole impulse of the No drama is non-realistic, non-representational. So everything about that character is supposed to simply symbolize ghost samurai. And everything that that actor does is supposed to tap into what they do is, do you know what method acting is? Anybody familiar with that term? Okay, what's method acting, Frank? You're nodding.
Method acting?
Mm-hmm.
I would like to say it's like a sort of like improv.
Not quite.
Acting without words.
No, method actors use words. But no, what method acting is, right, it's a way, it's essentially a way to learn how to fake emotional states to make it look real. So, like, most Western trained actors, if they have to be in a scene where they're going to be, crying and upset, right, they will try to conjure up a memory of a time when they were really upset, when they were, to try to replicate that feeling in this particular situation. Japanese acting is also about sort of trying to capture the emotional essence of a character, but it's almost more like a kind of possession by that character and that character's specific emotional situation. It's not about relating that character to some emotion you felt in the past. So Zeami, in addition to writing No plays, was also Japan's first drama theorist, and he wrote a long treatise called Fushikaden. Don't ask me what that translates to, I don't actually know. But in Fushikaden, he breaks down Japanese acting into essentially three elements. There are three things that an actor really needs to keep in mind. The first, and probably most important, he calls hana, or the flower. And the flower for Zeami is the quality of the actor's performance that captures the audience's interest. The second element is yugen, which translates to elegance. And yugen refers to a kind of, not necessarily elegance in the way we'd think of it. We're not talking about like top hats and monocles and caviar. We're talking about a kind of subtlety. Bless you. Right, so yugen, right, no elegance is about saying a lot with very small movements and very small gestures. And the third element is monomane, or imitation. Now, once again, he's not talking about imitation of things in the real world. What he is talking about is capturing the spiritual or emotional essence of a character. So, an actor who learns to perform monomane, right, to imitate the emotional and spiritual states of characters, right, with yugen, with elegant subtlety, then produces the flower, produces the quality that captures the interest of the audience. Right. So, in a play like Atsumori, the characters are not all that clearly individuated. They're types. This is also fairly common in no drama, right? The characters tend to be universal types. So how do you capture the emotional or spiritual essence of a character who's basically a stereotype, you know? I have to be a monk, or I have to be a samurai. I remember seeing a couple of years ago, I think it was an episode of Family Guy, someone talks about preparing for something as thoroughly as Ben Affleck prepares for a role, and he's sitting there on his couch like, oh shit, I have to be Henry VIII in an hour. I don't know. All right, that'll do it. But you know, like if you're talking about like sort of a known historical personage, right? You can often, in Western acting that relies on this kind of more natural imitation, you can rely on mannerisms, right? You can rely on observation. You can rely on history and that person's biography to give you some information about how to portray them. In Japanese drama, you often can't really do that. They are still drawing things often from history, but if you're representing it in a non-naturalistic style, right, the way you have to get into the character is to relate the character to particular Buddhist states or concepts. And there are two Buddhist doctrines that are especially relevant to the known. I'll give you this, and this is what we'll end on because we're running short on time. Now, the particular flavor of Buddhism that was most popular in Zeami's Japan is it's called Zen Buddhism. And there are two Zen doctrines that are particularly important for understanding the concept of character and known. The first is called anatta. A-N-A-T-T-A. And essentially, what anatta describes is the incoherence of individual personality. According to Zen Buddhism, there is no enduring self beyond the flow of conscious experience. Right? So essentially what we are for a Zen Buddhist, right, are our experiences. There's no overarching transcendent self above that. We are what we see, hear, smell, feel, taste, touch, right? We are what we think. The second important Zen Buddhist concept for understanding no characters is called Satori, or enlightenment. And Satori is the goal of Zen Buddhism, right? This is what people are trying to get at when they're sitting staring at a blank white wall for hours. Right? Satori is the complete dissolution of personality. Right? So the goal is to eliminate any sense of personality, any sense of self, right? In union with larger universal forces. And we see this on page 1503, we can see this at work. Right? From, let's start again, like after Atsumori's lively dance ending in Space Square. I'll read the Atsumori part, you guys read the chorus part again? All right. Then in time, His Majesty's ship sailed.
The whole land behind his narrow.
Mm-hmm.
Anxious to be aboard, I sought the shore. But all the warships and the imperial barge stood already far, far out to sea.
I was stranded. Reining in my horse, I halted at a loss for what to do.
There came then, galloping behind me, Kumagai no Jiro no Zane, shouting, "You will not escape my arm." At this, Atsumori wheeled his mount, and swiftly, all undaunted, drew his sword. We first exchanged a few rapid blows, then still on horseback, close to grapple fell, and wrestled on the wave-washed strand. You invested me, and I was slain. Now karma brings us face to face again. You are my foe, Atsumori shouts, lifting his sword to strike. But Kumagai with kindness has repaid old enmity, calling the name to give the spirit peace. They at last shall be reborn together upon one lotus throne in paradise. Rensho, you were no enemy of mine.
All right, thank you. Very good. Very well done, all of you. So, what the end result of this is, right, what's supposed to happen, like all of that old enmity between these two former warriors is dissolved, and they are to be reborn in paradise, right, sitting upon a single lotus, sort of as a single being, right? When we get to nirvana, when we reach enlightenment, all difference disappears. Our individual personalities disappear. Our individual histories disappear. Right? Once we're out of this flow of consciousness that creates our personhood and our personalities, we become one with everything and everyone. All right, any questions? More or less got this? Everybody clear? All right, great. So I've got some reading questions for you. Next time we're going to be looking at West African oral epic. So we're going to be spending 2 days on that.